Welcome to another edition of the Red Pill Diaries. I'm your host, Rashid, and I'm here just to talk to you about a lot of things that the average person doesn't know or understand. And I know it's a little grainy, so you're going to have to deal with it a little bit. We've been having technical difficulties, and but that's what we have on YouTube through StreamYard. Um, but I want to talk to you about the situation between the United States, NATO, so called the European Union, and Russia over Ukraine. The escalation continues, but I bet a lot of you don't know that this thing can be highly explosive. And when it finally goes up in flames, it will be highly explosive. I don't think the time is now for it to go up. I think it has a little bit more time to fester because America still has to deal with, she still wants to fight Iran. She still wants to do things to Iran. I'm trying to see why this is doing this. This has to be the program and not the computers because neither one of the other computers are doing this. So it has to be the program, the StreamYard program. But over here I have another program on which is doing recording also. I just want you all to know that, and it's different than StreamYard. But again, I believe that America still has a war to fight in the Middle East, which will devastate the Middle Eastern North African region. I call it the MENA region, MENA, an acronym for Middle Eastern North African region. I've been saying that for years, for over a decade, been calling it MENA. And and I think because America is so belligerent, and because Israel has been so belligerent, and because they are hell bent on dominating at all costs, divide and conquer, genocide, sanctions, covert operations, the influx of terrorism, occupying nations refusing to leave, as Iraq has asked them on multiple occasions to leave. And not just America, but the so called international coalition. They have asked them to leave and they're refusing to leave. All they do is draw down some. They say, well, if they ask us to go, we'll go. And yet you never leave. And the media never questions them on this, right? And this goes on everywhere. In North Africa, France says, we'll leave. And then they'll say, we're going to draw down our staff and not be as visible. That doesn't mean you're leaving. What that means is you're going behind closed doors now. And so I believe that when this war takes place in the Middle East, North African region, I think it will be a regional war. And it will be very brutal. And this will weaken the empire to such a degree that when she pivots completely towards Asia to fight the rising Chinese dragon, China is going to going to beat the brakes off of America with her economic and military prowess. As I said on our show yesterday, how can you fight an effective war? How can you fight a successive war? How can you fight a war that you want to win if you're fighting against your financier, your investor of infrastructure, your lender of choice, your number one trade partner, right? And on top of all of that, they have surpassed you in the Army, the Navy, and are about to surpass you with the Air Force. They are also the largest manufacturers. So their manufacturing base is amazing, and they can outcompete you. And so when your warship is sunk or your warplanes are knocked down, it may take you a year, 2 years to get you the replacement. But without the rare earths, because you'll be fighting them, so the rare earths will become scarce, and all of the motherboards and all that stuff that you import from them, that'll be scarce. And then the sanctions on you from your opponent will devastate your economy because 93 to 95% of all goods on Walmart shelves come from China. And if they put an embargo on you, that is mass unemployment, mass starvation, because people won't be able to afford to feed themselves for whatever reason when they go to the grocery stores because they won't have the money. They won't be able to pay their bills. And you can't reconstitute the losses. But China can reconstitute its losses. Even if you were to default on your $1 trillion+ loan with them, they have the gold, they have the silver, they have copper, they have, just like they have strategic oil reserves, they have strategic gold reserves, strategic silver reserves, strategic copper reserves. They have all these things that you neglected. And also they have currency to currency trade. They have regional trade. They're in different trading blocks that are outside of your control. So you may be sanctioned by China and you may sanction China, but who do you think is going to hurt the worst? You or China? And if China were to lose 1, 2, 3 aircrafts at a time and maybe 1 or 2 ships, you know that there was a naval write-up about it, that China is building more ships in 1 month than the United States and NATO together builds in 1 year. With the manufacturing capacity of China and the lack thereof with America, how do you think you're going to fare? And on top of that, your whole economy is debt-based. So you need more and more debt. But the problem is you need more and more people to buy the debt, or you turn and buy the debt yourself. And either way, that's a recipe for disaster. And no one takes the time out to think about these things, to analyze these things, right? And I want to apologize for the quality of the video. Is not my, this is not me. This is the StreamYard. This has to be, because we're not even on there right now. I just got a text from Rashid. Give me a second. 1 second. So again, as I talk about America, NATO, and their war on Russia, I'm also going to talk about the Nazi connections, the Nazi connections between the United States, Ukraine, and NATO. Most people don't know that George Bush's, I'm talking about George Bush Sr., his father was an intricate part of helping arm the Nazis. Most people don't know that. Most people don't know that a lot of people in government sympathized with the Nazis. As a matter of fact, after the end of World War II, a lot of Nazi scientists, engineers, architects, and officials were covertly flown into the United States and immediately started working for the US government. Right? Some was dispatched to Russia to be debriefed. Some was dispatched to Argentina. Some went across Europe, and you're seeing the festering and the lingering effect of that today, with the irrational policies of America, with the insane policies of the EU, and with the support, the total support of both American and the EU/NATO governments to the Nazis that they installed into power in every branch of power in the Ukraine. They thought it may be beneficial to do that to hurt Russia. And in reality, just before this stuff started happening, the Western press, including the United States press, talked about the growing extremism in Ukraine and the Nazi brigades, and how they were indoctrinating their children and their women to the Nazi ideology. This was on Vice, VICE. This was on Vice. And no one seems to want to anymore. They want to forget these things. But what I'm telling you is you have to connect these things to what is going on. Why would America sympathize with Nazis? Even if they could benefit a little bit. Why would they sympathize when their whole mantra, their whole spiel that they had been given for decades upon decades is with America won the fight against Nazi Germany? Huh? And now you're financing them, you're training them, you're arming them, you're giving them political and economic cover. You make that make sense. So there must be some inherent agreement with the ideology for you to automatically shut down your media from even reporting on the growing Nazification of the Ukraine because you think that it will hurt and savage Russia. Do you see? What I'm trying to show you is the hypocrisy of America and the Western world and their connection to Nazism. I mean, this is not a slight. This is the truth. And this is bringing forth war, as a matter of fact. Let's go to something, okay? If you don't think this is bringing the world closer and closer to war, let's go to something. We're going to follow some articles here, okay? So we see every time America and the West say they're not going to do something, they escalate. We're not going to give them this. We're not going to, well, we just want Ukraine to be able to defend themselves. And they continue to blur the lines and push past all of the acceptable norms for Russia, as if they're trying to entice Russia into striking NATO territory. But if it were me and I had the military might of the Russian Federation and my existence was on the line and my troops were fighting and dying in Ukraine, I would immediately, as a man of integrity, would go to the podium and address not only my nation, but I would address the entire world specifically, and I would call names, specifically America and NATO. I would speak in whatever language I am. If I'm Russian, I would speak Russian. And then after each time I stop, I would reiterate that in English so that it will be no mistakes, no misinterpretation, no misunderstanding of meaning or shade of purposes. What will come next? See, if you continue to codify or allow America to push the norm, she's going to continue to do it. If you will continue to allow NATO to push the norms, guess what's going to happen? Since they're minions of America, they're going to continue to do it. So today, this is what the German defense foreign minister said. Remember, this is the same woman who said, we don't care what even if they tell us to stop, we're going to do what we want to do, and we're going to arm and finance Ukraine. This is the same woman. just in case you didn't know that. And her name is Annalena Baerbock. Annalena Baerbock. Germany at war with Russia. It says Annalena Baerbock made the admission in a debate with EU colleagues pushing for the delivery of tanks to Kiev. Arguing in favor of sending tanks to Kiev, German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock said EU countries were fighting a war against Russia. Now, remember all of this stuff that, Joe Biden said, we're not going to confront Russia. We don't want a head-to-head conflict with the Russian Federation. Remember, all of the EU or so-called NATO nations said the same thing. Well, Mrs. Baerbock let the cat out the bag and told you exactly what was going on. She's arguing in favor of sending tanks to Kiev. German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock said EU countries were fighting a war against Russia. Or what? But why are you fighting a war against Russia? Has Russia attacked you? No. Has Russia threatened to attack you? No. Did Russia sanction any of you? No. Did Russia sabotage anything in Europe? No. So why are you fighting a war against Russia? There must be some underlying plans and meanings for this war, being that Ukraine is not a NATO nation, quote unquote. And Ukraine was lying in the sphere of Russian influence. So for you to be this gung-ho and to blatantly say that in your parliament, this shows that we're in the creep mode. Mission creep, creep, creep. Okay. So it goes on and says, US and EU officials have previously gone out of their way to claim they were not a party to the conflict in Ukraine. And therefore, I've said already in the last days, yes, we have to do more to defend Ukraine. Why? This is Baerbock's words. We have to do more to defend Ukraine. Why? Why didn't you have this amount of passion to defend Ukraine from the coup instituted by the US and the EU? Why? Why is it all of a sudden so necessary to put the security of your nation and even the world on the line to try to rip Ukraine away from Russia's sphere of influence? That was not your normal thinking, but we know whose normal thinking it was. It was the United States thinking, because they had think tanks, and people in those think tanks became government officials and military officials and head of arms companies. And they wrote books. They became authors and TV hosts and national security advisors who said to keep Russia weak, and I'm paraphrasing, and from becoming a great power, you have to rip Ukraine away from its sphere of influence. That was said over 30 years ago. Look at where we at today. Look at where we are at today. I just want you to understand that. This did not happen by chance. This did not happen by chance. They let you know things up front. And they put it in movies, they put it in books, they put it in radio. I remember I was on another platform I host. I was talking about the drive to unseat Gaddafi and the destruction of Libya. And I remember a while ago, years ago, nobody had ever talked about this. It wasn't on YouTube, nothing like this. So when they put this stuff on YouTube, they actually got it from my line of thinking and what I said. I didn't get the credit for it, and I really don't care, but I just lay this out. When you look at the Libyan scenario, this was put out years ago in a Ray Liotta movie when he was a prisoner on an island. And he kept having flashbacks. And in his flashbacks, he and the US military and their allies were in Benghazi, helping the people there. Where's Benghazi? Libya. A coup was instituted. Right? So now that they're moving with Ukraine, Zbigniew Brzezinski had already talked about these plans. So this stuff is, most people act as if this just comes out of the blue. These people are sociopaths, and they leave a trail and a history of their malign thinking, their arrogance, and their arrogant, irrational, racist policies. It's nothing new. Let's go further. And therefore, I've said already in the last days, yes, we have to do more to defend Ukraine. Yes, we have to do more also on tanks. Baerbock said during a debate at the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, or PACE for an acronym. On Tuesday, she said that on Tuesday, and it says, but the most important and the crucial part is that we do it together, and that we do not do the blame game in Europe, because we are fighting a war against Russia and not against each other. So Annalena Baerbock the German foreign minister openly said, after all of the denials, after all of how dare anyone say we are fighting Russia? All of this foolishness. In the parliament, she admitted that it was Europe that was at war with Russia. But why would Europe do that when Europe has no military capability to fight Russia? And why would Europe sanction Russia when Russia supplies it with the largest supply of gas and oil and all kinds of trade with Europe? And why would Europe fight a war with Russia when Russia is the most powerful nuclear power on the planet? And any war could spill over in the continent. It has to be something behind that. And it is the Nazi mentality of the ruling elite in America and Britain. So they're pushing the world towards war because they have this ideology in their head that I got to rule and everybody are subjects to me. And if you don't bow down as quickly when I tell you to bow down, and you don't do what I tell you to do, and you don't act the way I tell you to act, then we're going to keep pushing the envelope until war is unavoidable. So this is where we are today. So this show, and I'm going to bring Rashid in. He's in now in the booth. So I'm going to bring Rashid in, and I'm going to let him come in on this because, again, this show is about America's and NATO's Nazi connection and their war on Russia. Let me bring Rashid in and let him speak a little bit. Go ahead, Rashid. How you doing today? And then come in on this.
I'm still kicking, Black. Still kicking. They used to have a brother used to say, he used to ask him, how you doing? He said, just like the one-legged man. I say I can't kick. So what's up now?
We're talking about America's connection to Nazism. Remember George Bush, Prescott Bush, which is George Bush Sr.'s father, helped fund and arm the Nazis. And what we're trying to do is show a connection with America's ideology and how she's pushing this thing about aggressive Russia, but yet she permitted and installed, financed, and armed and trained Nazis all across Ukraine, and then made the U.S. and Western media immediately stop reporting on Nazism in Ukraine when right before the war they were talking about it.
From what my understanding was, Henry Ford was a supporter of Hitler.
Yes.
And he used to help push a lot of his armaments. Remember, they had a group of oligarchs in America trying to overthrow Roosevelt.
Yes.
And had Smedley Butler. We're going to do the same thing. And the Nazis and the Jews themselves were saying, how can you be talking about me and look what you did to the American Indian? Mm-hmm. So they're all the same fella, all cut from the same cloth. And they believe that they should overthrow and rule everybody on the planet. And if you have a problem with that, then we'll have ISIS to show up at your front door, or Boko Haram, or any one of our hired killers to show up and start they cutthroats. Soon as you ding dong, it's Mr. Cutthroat from America here, and we're ready to overthrow it.
So Angelina Baerbock, the German foreign minister, the one who said, I don't care. Remember a few weeks ago, she said, we don't care what our population say. We're going to, even if we have to neglect our own population, we're going to arm Ukraine. We're going to fund Ukraine. And this got her in a lot of hot water. But in the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, which is the PACE Assembly, on Tuesday, she said, but the most important thing, first of all, she said, but the most important and the crucial part of this is that we do it together, and that we do not do the blame game in Europe, because we are fighting a war against Russia and not against each other. Your thoughts on that? And while you're thinking, I'm going to black my screen for a minute. My lighting is blinking, and I got to try to get the light. So I'm gonna be listening, but I got to do this lighting real quick.
Once again, this is America. they do believe in doing that. That's what they want to do. War. What is? I'll give you a perfect example. What's that? 1984 book. War is peace, and peace is war. War. You got to understand that the empire is losing her grip on the planet. As we was talking about, and I was talking with somebody else about that yesterday. Argentina and Brazil, and they had Venezuela. They're going to invite a lot of people in South America to have a South American currency, independent of the dollar.
You're right.
Asia, China. Asia, the European Union. The Asian Union. Iran.
The Eurasian Union
and China are getting together to have a currency for themselves. The BRICS is getting ready to have a currency. So what is that doing? That's leaving the dollar out in the cold. Mm-hmm. When the music stops, the only one that ain't gonna have a seat is the American dollar. Mm-hmm. And without the American dollar being the world reserve currency, she cannot run up all these huge deficits because nobody ain't gonna help her pay for it. Mm-hmm. That was when you think of it, was a scheme that Henry Kissinger and Nixon and the rest of the sons of Nixon came up with this petrodollar. It was a brilliant scheme.
Oh yes,
America had no money in the 60s. At the end of the 1960s, she was about to go bankrupt, and she come up with this scheme to make America's dollars the reserve currency. Then she can run up debt because everybody had to have a dollar. Now nobody wants the dollars. So what is she gonna do? War. That's what it is, and the people can't see this. I was listening to Go ahead. I was listening to a couple of what's his name? Gonzalo Lira and a group of his guys. He had a couple of Europeans talking about war and what China, and they have the prognosticators and what's going to happen. What they don't understand is America got to go to war because her economy is gone. Her money is gone. Mm-hmm. If nobody wants to buy the dollar, then that means all the big old ships from China stop coming over here. Yep. And if 93% of the ship of Walmart's goods come from China, then what does that happen to what happens to Walmart?
That's what I was saying at the beginning of the show. I was talking about they don't understand the knock-on effect of this. Where you think you're going to get all of this stuff, and remember, if war breaks out, China has a manufacturing base, so if they lose a ship, they can replace it like this. The United States doesn't. And look at this. If Walmart is the largest employer in America outside of the U.S. government, if Walmart no longer has the product in the stores, that means they no longer can pay for employees, which means that people will go and be fired. And now they don't have anywhere to buy food, to pay bills. And now you're looking at a disaster at home. And that means a civil war at home because people are going to start going crazy.
And not only Walmart, Targets,
yes,
and all of them get stuff from China.
Yeah.
If the Chinese stop sending goods to, I was listening to one of the for the ports out in Los Angeles, one of the reporters, and he said if this port closes within 2 weeks, every store in America would be empty. Mm-hmm. 2 weeks. That shows you how much volume they bring in from China.
And let me go back.
One second. Los Angeles ports, Long Beach and Los Angeles, handles 50% of the goods that come inside America. Now,
let me even say something even more. And Rashid, I'm getting some text messages I got to check, and I'll tell you about it later on. And that's what you hear it in the background. But anyway, think about this. With the knock-on effect of that, that's just Rashid. That's not just Walmart and Target and stuff. Think about now. You can't. The shipping contracts have to be broken through the trucking companies. The trucking companies' contracts with the gas have to be nullified. This knock-on effect of everywhere. Now the banks are looking for their money from the trucking companies and from the people that they gave loans to, and now they're out of business. And so now there's a drag-on, knock-on effect. Dominoes just fall.
The trains, because that's where you get most of your goods at.
Yeah.
They come through the ports, they load them on trains, and then head them east.
But we
your train contracts. That's the breaking down of America. So this is what the wars are do to stop what's happening, and the people can't see
it. And they don't get a lot of these prognosticators, even though they may be more popular or they have more connections. They don't get the depth of what is actually going on. They don't understand that an entire world is being removed, and this is on the order of divine. But look, check this out. You know you have to be insane, America, to openly put in your papers that we may give Ukraine strike weapons that can strike deep into the heart of Russia. A nuclear power that, listen, outside of China, Russia is the most powerful land power on the planet. So any war on the continent of Europe, Russia will run roughshod over any NATO or U.S. military confrontation. But I want to say something. I got to, and then I want you to say something about this because I really want you to address this, and I'm gonna let you address it. So, with that being said, there was also reports that now America, the UK, and NATO is doing something that you and I talked about 2 shows ago, and it just came out today. Now they are openly contemplating arming Ukraine with depleted uranium rounds. But check this out. This is what Moscow said after that. It says Moscow has cautioned Western powers against supplying Ukraine with depleted uranium munitions and with long-range weaponry capable of striking at cities deep within Russian territory. Supplying Ukraine with depleted uranium munitions for Western military hardware would be regarded by Moscow as the use of a dirty bomb. That's what was said. So they're saying that any use of, and they just didn't stop there. They said, and the use of white phosphorus, like we were talking about. Moscow said that they would take that as an attack with either a dirty bomb or a nuclear strike, and they will immediately hit back hard. What is in the mind? Because it seems like those other guys, I mean, they do good commentary, but it seems like they can't grasp the situation at hand. And we know why we can grasp it. But what makes you, when you look at this, what do you think about the thinking of the U.S. empire, the UK, and NATO?
It's like a man that's, as we always say, a man that's riding on a horse refused to get off and let somebody else walk. They own the leadership of the planet. And if I cannot rule, I'll bring everybody down. I'll tear this whole place up. I'll make the earth a burning cinder before I allow somebody else to come in and take my spot. The only thing I know is how to be the king. I don't know anything else. And I don't know how to be a servant. I'm not going to allow myself to step down and get in your position. I'm going to go down fighting. Now, I was listening to on the news today that America said they're going to send 31 Abrams tanks and Germany going to send 2 Leopards. As if that's going to make the Russians say, oh, they're sending in some tanks and run for the hills.
They just upped it. They upped that. The Germans upped it to a company, which is like 4 platoons worth of tanks.
So what is that? 4? How many tanks? 20 or 40?
I think that's like 12 to 15 tanks.
I was listening to Douglas McGregor, and he said that Russia have 2,500 tanks on the battlefield. 50 tanks is gonna make them run for the hill.
And wait till they deploy those Armada tanks.
It is a joke. It's what it is for the stupid people in the West, the gullible sheep, that they can tell them any old thing and they go for it. Now, how in the hell is 50 tanks gonna beat 2,500 tanks? By the sheer volume of numbers, they're gonna win. You can't stop this. And what did Putin say? We ain't even started the fight yet.
Yeah.
And then all of their money, all of their arms are depleted. We ain't got nothing else to send them.
And think about it. The escalation continues, and now they're openly talking about sending F-16 over. They can shot out the air left and right. But with that said, this is what was said by the German chancellor. What is his name? Scholz, Olaf Scholz. That's what his name is. He says, listen to this. And this show won't be long. He says, Germany, listen to me. I'm telling you, in their world, what is up is down, what is in is out, what is round is square. It's a bizarro world. This is what he says. This is to cover his behind and to cover the Western behind after they continue to escalate. Germany will adhere to the principle of avoiding escalation between Russia and NATO despite its decisions to send tanks to Ukraine. That's an oxymoron, the German chancellor said. So you're not going to escalate, but you're sending tanks to Ukraine.
And then you think of Putin and Russia. If somebody is waging war with me, why would I give them any oil, gas at all, even by a proxy?
That's right.
If India is we send it to India, then they ship it up and send it to you. Well, then the hell I cut off India then.
That's right.
I give you nothing.
Yes.
I don't care if the Indians mark it up 10, 15, 20% or 100% or whatever. I would make sure they starve or freeze in winter. If you're killing my soldiers.
That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. And that's our mentality. And we're saying, why would they would even do business with these people when these people are funding militias that are actively seeking to kill your citizens, blow up your infrastructure, wage war against you, and are killing your soldiers with an open declaration that they want to bleed Russia dry. And yet you want me to send you my oil, my gold, my gas, and my wheat and grain and farm supplies. Have you lost your mind?
My fertilizer to grow their food.
Yeah.
That just don't make sense. Mind?
So this oxymoron by a moron. This was an oxymoron spoken by a moron, saying that Germany will adhere to the principle of avoiding escalation between Russia and NATO, despite its decision to send tanks to Ukraine. I'm not going to escalate while I'm escalating.
It's almost as somebody has got hooks in the leader's jaw and dragging and reeling them in to the final battle.
Yeah.
They got no choice.
So, according to the dictionary, the word escalate means increase rapidly. Soar, rocket, shoot up, mount, surge, spiral, grow, develop, mushroom, increase, be increased, and be stepped up. So what did Europe say? We were going to step up what? Our armed supplies to Ukraine. So if you were going to step up, according to the dictionary, according to the definition of the word, you are saying that you are prepared to do what? Escalate. So how can you say you're going to stick with the principle of non-escalation between Russia and NATO at the same time escalating by stepping up weapons deliveries to Ukraine?
Remember, this is not the only war setting.
I know.
The Middle East is going to erupt.
All right, I talked about that at the beginning too. About
Asia is going to erupt.
I told them about that.
This whole thing by divine is to bring down the American empire.
Right.
Watch
and
and
I
see.
want to play. I want to play something for you all. Okay. And I want you to remember what I just said to you, Rashid, what I said to the audience about with these people, with these megalomaniacs, with these sociopaths. Up is down, in is out, round is square, triangle is rectangle, black is white, and blue is pink. This is what they want to present to you. So I want you to listen to this. I was listening to an interview the other day, and something just stood out with the interview, and so I cut up a little bit of it, and I'm gonna share it right now. And so those of you who are listening, this is about an 8-minute clip. We're not going to have the show long, okay? But and we want to thank everybody that's in the chat and that's going to be in the chat. Thank you all for joining us. We really appreciate your presence and your support. And as we always say, that when you give your time, make sure that you get the equivalent of your time, because time is the most precious commodity and asset that anybody could have. Okay, so listen, I want you to pay close attention to this.
I mean, this is one of the most shocking moments from Davos, and hilarious. I mean, you gotta just kind of laugh at these freaks. This isn't just anybody though. It's the NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg, who was a Prime Minister of Norway as a social democrat, I believe. And, this isn't someone coming from the far right.
It is extremely important that President Putin doesn't win this war, partly because it will be a tragedy for the Ukrainians, but it will be very dangerous for all of us, because then the message to authoritarian leaders, not only to Putin, but also other authoritarian leaders, is that when they use brutal force, when they violate international law, they achieve what they want. And that will be a very bad and dangerous lesson. It will make the world more dangerous and us more vulnerable. And that's the reason why, if we want a negotiated peaceful solution to the war in Ukraine, we need to provide military support to Ukraine. That's the only way. Weapons, they are the way to peace.
Okay, wait, we got to hear that again.
Rewind.
Weapons, they are the way to peace.
And then you can see that NATO promoted that video. An official NATO logo, which is a converted swastika, comes on screen. So NATO is proud of what Stoltenberg is saying there. This is a message that they want to send. Weapons are the way to peace, which obviously is, I hate to use this term, but it is Orwellian, war is peace, weapons bring peace.
Yeah.
But what your thoughts?
I mean, yeah, look, could be a great new anthem. Like maybe you two could take the lead on this and put out a new anthem for Ukraine proxy war called Weapons Are the Way to Peace. Yeah, no, look, but this is, I mean, see, what is even his job, Jens Stoltenberg, as the NATO Secretary General? He doesn't actually have a military role because NATO has a military council, so they handle that. So what is he actually, like, what's his job? It's basically to be a spokesperson for whatever the U.S. government wants him to say and to sell weapons and to hawk to taxpayers in NATO countries the need for them to spend their money on weapons. Like that's basically what his job is. And so accordingly, he has to come up with creative ways to sell it. So I guess this is what he came up with. Weapons are the way to peace, because he recognizes that people don't want a war. They want peace. And so his way to sell them on more weapons is to say that this will help bring them peace. But look, I mean, everyone forgets this is not some case. Like, you don't have to support Russia's invasion to recognize that there's a long background to this, that Russia was provoked, that all the warnings from top U.S. officials like George Kennan, William Burns, that a NATO membership, NATO expansion was a red line for Russia, the coup in Ukraine, I mean, all the things we've talked about. But also there's a background, and the background includes that Russia put out detailed proposals to NATO and to the U.S. about a year ago, just over a year ago, in December 2021. These long draft treaties laying out all of Russia's concerns about NATO expansion, about the positioning of NATO weaponry on Russia's borders, right? For example, because Russia doesn't have Russian weaponry in Canada or Mexico, but the U.S. has heavy offensive weaponry surrounding Russia, and Russia wanted to address all that. Russia also wanted to finally see the implementation of the Minsk Accords, which is the agreed upon peace deal for ending the civil war that began in Ukraine after the 2014 coup, and that Ukraine refused to implement because the Ukraine government was basically taking the side of its far-right nationalists who didn't want any kind of accommodation that recognized the rights of ethnic Russians instead of Ukraine. So Russia put out proposals to address all of this. And what was the U.S. response? They wouldn't even discuss the core issues. The core issue for Russia, for example, was NATO expansion and the placement of and the rollback of NATO weaponry in NATO states. Russia proposed to NATO and the U.S., you can keep your troop deployments, you can keep your offensive weapons, but except in the states that you've expanded to after 1997, we want to see your weapons rolled back there. So keep your weapons in all these states that you have, including ones that are pointed at us, but in the states where you've placed weapons after 1997, where you brought in like a whole new wave of states, including the Baltic states, those have to be rolled back because those are too close to us. And based on that, the U.S. refused to even discuss it. So the idea now that the only way to peace is through more war is just a lie, because there's already been out there proposals on the table to address this, which could easily be revived. But the official position is it's hegemony over peace. And any agreement that constrains the U.S.-led NATO system is deemed to be off limits. And so they just don't even want to discuss it. And who has to pay the price? It's Ukrainians, who will continue to be sacrificed under the mantra of weapons are the way to peace.
And the next NATO Secretary General, the one being put forward by the U.S., is the Canadian Deputy Prime Minister, Chrystia Freeland, who I don't want to call her a Nazi, but she definitely is pretty enthusiastic about Nazis in Ukraine.
Her grandfather was a Nazi. I mean,
her grandfather, Michael Chomiak, indirectly worked for Adolf Hitler. Yeah. His publication, which was based in Ukraine and in Poland, was funded through Hitler's information ministry. He worked under Joseph Goebbels. He lived in the seized property of a Jew in Poland. He supported the Nazi Germany, and she lied about it. And then 2 Russian diplomats in Canada who brought this up before the media were deported for telling the truth about her. And not only that, she worked for the Encyclopedia of Ukraine, which her grandfather, Michael Chomiak, started. And if you look in the Encyclopedia of Ukraine, the way they talk about Stepan Bandera is pretty positive. The leader of the Nazi collaborator OUNB forces. She also wrote for a Ukrainian diaspora publication. She was put up for this job when she was starting her journalistic career in Canada, which ran ads for neo-Nazi summer camps for youth, Bandera Summer Camp, which these ads in the classified section of the paper that would have Chrystia Freeland articles would actually have Galicia SS logos and iron crosses. I mean, it's pretty sick stuff. And when the war erupted in February, she went out to a rally in Ottawa and held up an OUNB red and black flag, the flag of the Nazi collaborator partisan army in Ukraine. So this is the person that the U.S. is putting up, at least right now, has announced as its possible preference for NATO Secretary General. It really speaks to what NATO is and always has been. But, moving along, I mean, there's just endless comments at Davos, we are standing with Ukraine until this war is won, by General James Cleverly. But here's a more, I think, consequential figure, and it's the leader of Poland, Andrzej Duda, the president. And, he's right there on the border with Ukraine. I always, find it peculiar how they balance the historical reality that Bandera, the hero of the post-Maidan regime, has slaughtered so many ethnic Poles, and he's being honored officially by the Ukrainian parliament, and Poland's support for this war. And I guess it's just the shared hatred of Russia.
And I know very well.
So with that said, and with us understanding this, and you heard what he said, the NATO's insignia is an inverted swastika, right? And what we want to know is, why is Russia, why are they so adamant about raising up Nazis and making Ukraine a Nazi nation? So as we were looking at the clip, I just put in a couple keywords, meaning of Nazism, right? And according to Google, It says, what is the best definition of Nazism? And it gives what Google deems as the best definition of Nazism. Check it. Nazism is a form of fascism with disdain for liberal democracy and the parliamentary system. It incorporates a dictatorship, fervent anti-Semitism, anti-communism, scientific racism, white power, and the use of eugenics into its creed. So you got your answer of NATO being a terroristic, racist organization, America to the core being a terroristic, racist organization. Because remember, from government to government, regardless, going all the way back to when they tried to overthrow the U.S. government under Roosevelt, there were a lot of fascist people up in there, and they had a disdain for what America likes to trumpet today, democracy. And we know that those people were adamantly pushing eugenics. Hillary Clinton was a eugenicist. She said that her idol was that singer woman, the founder of Planned Parenthood. So this is racist to the core.
And remember,
go ahead, say what you have to say.
None of the people that conspired to overthrow Roosevelt ever went to jail.
None of them.
They didn't get their wealth confiscated. They just stayed in power as if nothing ever happened.
Right.
And their children are ruling America today.
Yeah.
This is why you see them leaning toward to have somebody to sit up and plot and plan the overthrow of Russia and thinking like, we're going to nuke Russia out of existence. And if the Russians going to sit there and say, oh, they coming and hit me, and oh, I can't do it, Russia going to start pushing buttons back. And I was listening to Scott Ritter last night, right? I was listening to a program with Scott Ritter last night, and somebody on one of the shows asked him, well, what do the American missile defense could stop Russia or China? He said, wait, absolutely not. Only thing you can do is just sit there and die. We don't have nothing. At least Russians got the S-400, S-500, and the S-600 coming out. Well, what about the American? We ain't got nobody, no S-nothing coming out. Only thing you gonna do is just gonna sit there and die. And the Pope, moronic the people of America, USA, 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 and your leadership is going. Remember when I sent those that article would have said what would happen in a nuclear war? Instantly, the surface where the bomb go off will reach 9 million degrees. You'll be vaporized. 1 second you're here, next second you're gone. You're not. And they just have no clue. They sit around and what's the old saying is, let somebody piss down their back and tell them it's raining. They take anything that these moronic misfits on these talking heads. Well, yes. What about you, Mr. General? Well, we'll be able to do this with Russia, and we'll be able to do that with the rest of them, and they won't be able to do anything. We're gonna send 50 tanks over there, and when the American tanks get there, the Russians gonna start and run home and start cry to Putin. 2,500 tanks, and you're gonna send 50, and that's gonna make a difference. What kind of a fool would be? Simple mathematics would tell you that wouldn't work.
But they don't apply. This is what I'm saying. These people don't apply logic. They don't apply mathematics, and they do. It is like, again, I hate to say this ad nauseum. It is like Bizarro Land. You know who Bizarro is in the comic book world. He was the
Superman.
Yeah. And so everything
up
in his
was down and down was up.
Yeah. And so we're watching that today in politics and geopolitics, and any sane and rational person looking at it and saying, what the hell are these people thinking? What are they doing? And they have no inclination to pause or stop or rethink their actions. They just continue to, yeah, if they run into the wall, they're going to keep running into the wall, keep running into the wall. Maybe one day I'll get through the wall. And then if you run into another one, it is absolutely, it's
one day, wait a minute, either my head gonna break or the wall gonna break.
Yeah. I'm like, and you know what though? It's a, we laugh about this, but it's absolutely a shame and embarrassing that people don't use analytical thinking. They just accept everything hook, line, and sinker. And if you tell them something, regardless to how much factual reality that you put before them, if it doesn't conform to their narrow thinking and the way that I would say the scribes of America
by the media,
yes, the scribes of America gives them, then they will reject you and everything that you're saying, even if it's to their benefit. And we're watching that right now in real time.
You sit up and watch the American military media sit up and tell you that the Russians are over in this Bakhmut. The Ukrainians say that it's a meat grinder. They're just killing all the Russians. What is the other way around? Like you say, it's the bizarro world. And they are the one that's.
And they say Russia using tactics of waves after waves, and they're getting mowed down in the, and it's the other way around. But the masses of, just like today, and Reuters reported that Soledad had fallen. Hell, we reported that days ago,
2 weeks ago.
But they could only bring it out now. And then this is what they say: and Ukraine had an orderly retreat. No, it's bodies everywhere. Russia had the orderly retreat, but up is down, down is up, in is out is in with these people, and the media. See, this is the point here, and I have to make this point very clear. These people in power think that they are doing something by dumbing down a society so that they can maintain power. They don't realize if you have an ignorant society, you are destroying the pillars of your society, because they can't maintain a society or have a progressive society that grows and expands and continues to flourish. If you have ignorance, that's a detriment to your security.
Remember, they had a cartoon, a television program. I mean, a commercial. Excuse me, a commercial where they said that if you have nobody that could continue on the technological development, then you have a dumbed down. They had one child, about 5-year-old, sitting in a jet and just sitting there looking. What right? Or somebody on a big rig truck, a 4 or 5, and he just sit around look. That's what's happening. You got people that don't understand what's going on, and they too stupid to see the forest for the trees.
That's right.
This is what's taking place.
That's
right. You got somebody sitting up there that's telling. I think that came with Nixon back with, they call them the sons of Nixon, Rumsfeld, Dick Cheney, George Bush, Pearl, all of them came up into the government under Nixon. They call them this, Nixon didn't have any children. I mean, sons. So they call these crooks the sons of Nixon, right? And I think one of his minions, Nixon's minions, came with a bright idea. Let's dumb down the society, right? Let's take the college and raise it up to exuberant amounts where the average Joe Blow can never go to college, and we can rule all of these like sheep, push them in there. They did that with the educational system. They did that with the medical system. While Nixon was here, the hospitals and stuff were community based. Get rid of that and let the corporations come in, and somebody pull out a tooth and it costs $10,000.
Yeah, and they outsource everything. Yeah. There used to be a time where you could go to a dentist and get everything done. You go to the dentist, they give you an X-ray and say, "We're going to send you to this person, and we're going to send you to that person," and then they'll
collect some of the money. The pharmaceuticals. They have one guy going and take over a company from a pharmaceutical medicine that was costing $100. After he gets finished, it costs $5,000.
Yeah. But that's the society, just like this. back to what we were saying with Putin. Now, I want you to think about the madness of America prior to 1997, and this is what Putin kept asking them to pull back to your situation to 1997, like you promised us. Like Jim Baker, the former Secretary of State of the United States, said that we would not move 1 inch east. And the United States, the United States and NATO at that time had what, 16 nations in NATO. Now, what is it, 30 or 32 nations? And they're all the way up to Russia's border. What if Russia decide to incorporate Mexico and Canada into the Shanghai Cooperation Organization? How would America feel about that? This would be unacceptable to her.
You go back to Jim Baker, the one you was talking about that made that agreement. He said when he came back home, the rest of the neocons and the president and them looked at him and said, "What did you say that for?" we ain't gonna agree to that.
Yeah.
He never lives up to his agreements. Once again, ask the Americans about all of the treaties that America made with him. Did he live up to one? He made hundreds of treaties. We won't do this. We won't move these. We won't do it. And broke every last word that he had. So if he break his word when he made his country, what do you think they're gonna do to you? He cannot help himself.
And to show you that he's a terrorist. Now this is and the influx of terrorism in the Caucasus, in the Balkans, in Africa, in Asia, and Latin America comes from him. This is from, and we've interviewed him multiple times on the show. This is from former U.S. psychological warfare officer Scott Bennett. This is what he said to Press TV. Okay, pay close attention.
The West and the CIA and the British Mossad and the Israeli Mossad and the British MI6 are trying desperately to destabilize Iran, to try and foment cover revolutions, to try and foment ethnic strife. They're trying to, by any means necessary, create conflict and division and animosity in order to break Iran apart and exploit those fractures into something that could be used to destabilize and tear the country apart and ultimately rape and pillage Iran and steal its natural resources. So any kind of protest or division should be recognized as a foreign infiltration operation. And the Iranian leadership, the religious leadership, the academic leadership, the political leadership, and the media in Iran should expose and condemn any of these protests as an act of foreign intervention.
So we know, even though he was speaking specifically about Iran, he's telling you that it is America, Israel, the British, and everybody else who are fomenting unrest in other countries. Go ahead, Rashid.
Wasn't he the one that they banned us for? Was all for him?
Oh my God! Yes, yeah. Oh my God! I didn't even think about that.
But Russia should have known. See, Putin and them, you think Putin, they should have known as when they pull this deal off with this Minsk deal. Isn't America the one that stirred up trouble in Chechnya and caused them all them lives? You never believed the empire. Never. Okay, the Minsk, okay, shaking hands with the rest of and as I was listening to one deal on I think it was RT, they were saying that the Russian media, the Russian leadership finally realized that they've been hoodwinked. That they been made a fool of when they would agree to anything that the West got to go. Because the West do not keep its word.
Right.
And if China go along with it, then anybody enter into agreement with the empire deserves what they get. I don't care who it is.
Listen to what Scott Ritter has to say real quick.
Well, I mean, there's a question of what are they doing and what are they able to do? What do they want to do and what are they able to do?
Right.
Look, there's no question that the United States provoked a confrontation, a conflict in Ukraine. No question. There's literally no debate about it. It was our irresponsible push for the expansion of NATO, combined with a counter reset policy. I mean, I remind everybody of the reset policy that was implemented by, or at least attempted to be implemented by, the Obama administration in 2009, the famous or infamous red button. Change policy, promote the political fortunes of Dmitry Medvedev and sink Vladimir Putin. When that didn't work, the United States went into overdrive to destabilize Vladimir Putin, supporting people like Navalny, bringing about the 2014 Maidan coup.
So we see Scott Ritter telling you this truth. Now, I hate to bring the show to a close, but I have to, because I have to go pick up my daughter, and I have to pick up my son, my daughter from work, my son from work, or what like that. So I have to do that. But we're going to continue talking on this, and we're going to continue giving it the truth. Now, for those of you who joined us, we pre-recorded this show late last night, which is it was on January 25th for today, because there's certain other things we have to take care of. So this is the latest news, but we're giving it to you today, January 26th. Rashid, what do you have to say in our closing?
Once again, stay tuned. Events are moving so fast that, you know, it used to be when it takes 6 months, half a year. You got to watch, keep it up on every day. I constantly tell everybody, stay tuned and keep your eyes on, because you may not see something and it may cause you to stumble and fall because you're not watching what's happening.
Yeah. Well, on that note, as we always say, we have to say it multiple times on the show, we know that the greatest commodity that anyone could give is your time. So we hope that the information that we have given you is as valuable as your time, and you take it to heart and apply it, so that you won't be caught out in the woods, so that you won't be caught in the storm that is brewing, that is threatening to take America. So on that note, know that we love you, but always remember that God loves you best. And as we go out, I gotta say it, Mama, your baby boy loves you. I love you more than life.